We are joined now by Rachel Canter, Executive Director of Mississippi First. She is also the board chair of the Mississippi Charter Schools Association. Also, Mike Hurst, who is director of the Mississippi Justice Institute. Mike, Rachel, thank you both for being on At Issue with us.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Rachel. Why are charter schools good for Mississippi?
The data on charter schools has grown over the last several years that we've had charter schools. We've had them in the U.S. since 1991. And what the data shows, the highly rigorous studies, is that charter schools are particularly good for students of color and low-income students. And those are two populations of students that we have a lot of here in Mississippi, and students who struggle a lot here in Mississippi. We know that if Mississippi wants to be first in education, wants to improve on our rankings, we have to do a better job of educating low-income kids and kids of color. And charter schools are one method of providing an excellent opportunity for an education for those students.
There's still a new thing here in Mississippi, the few charter schools that we have. Is there enough data yet to determine if they're a success here?
No. The charter schools that are open, there are 3 open now. 2 have been open for a year and a 3rd opened this fall. So the 2 that have been open for a year do not yet have school grades. Those are expected to come out towards the end of the month. However, this is going to be kind of an odd year because we moved to more rigorous assessments and we've moved to a fully new accountability system. So a lot of schools and districts across the state are going to see their grades drop, and this is going to be the first year of data for those charter schools. So it's really a resetting year for all schools across Mississippi, and it's the first year for charter schools. So we're not going to know a huge amount about the charter schools in this first set of data. We hope to see some glimmers of success and what's likely to come, but what we're really looking for is the 3-year trend data to see that the charter schools are really making progress for the students that they're serving over time.
And Wilson, let me jump in there. Rachel has told us about the data, and that's important. But I represent some parents and families and kids who attend charter schools here in Jackson. And I've heard the real world stories from those folks and about how it's changed their lives, changed the students' lives, getting out of a system that's not meeting their needs and being able to get excited when they get up in the morning and be able to go to school and learn. And the improvement that they've seen firsthand is the real success story of charter schools.
What is it about it that's so different that they're observing that makes that experience so different for them than it was in a standard public school?
What they tell me is the environment is different, the way the teachers teach is different, the way they can adjust the curriculum so that it meets their needs specifically rather than just sort of a general type of education. The way that they fit the curriculum for the child rather than just for the school really helps them grow on an individual basis much better than they have otherwise.
And Mike brings up an important point. We talk a lot about data and research at Mississippi First, but behind each data point is an individual child. And those individual children, as we see them grow, those are real stories, and the children in those schools, we are going to be able to see certain signs of success as we go along, even though this first year of data is not going to tell us a huge amount, but we should be able to see children making progress, children satisfied with the education that they're receiving, and a high retention rate, which says that children and parents are satisfied enough that they're continuing to make this choice because they don't have to go to these charter schools.
What do you make of the criticism that charter schools attract and essentially siphon off some of the best students from the standard public schools, and how what state that leaves the existing public schools in after they've left and gone to a charter school?
I would say that criticism has no basis in fact. So if you look at the children who went to the charter schools from JPS, they're coming in several grade levels behind. They are definitely not a crop of the most advanced students at JPS. They're students who are struggling in a lot of ways, and one of the primary drivers of why parents make this choice is because they tell stories of how their children were not being successful in the traditional public school environment, whether academically or socially, having issues that led them to want to make another choice. Parents whose kids are successful in school are happy with the schools that their kids have because their kids are successful, and that is what is most important to a parent. Is my child successful, not what type of school I go to? And so the children who have made that choice, that's a big deal to switch schools, and they're doing it because they're not satisfied are not getting the education, they're falling behind. And that's very real to the children here in Jackson, and that's also what we see in the research nationwide.
And let's step back for a second. Charter schools. You know, I talked to my family outside of Jackson where charter schools isn't being talked about much. What are charter schools, they ask me. Charter schools are nothing but free public schools. That's it. They're free public schools that don't have the bureaucracy and the red tape that allows the teachers to teach these children how they need to be taught. The siphoning argument really doesn't hold up, because if you look at these schools, they're opening up their doors to every child in Jackson. And they come to, they apply, and as long as they have seats in that classroom, those kids get in. There's no academic requirement. There's no siphoning off the best kids. These are the kids whose parents want what's best for the best of them.
What are the admission requirements? Are they different from the standard public schools? Are you obligated to take every child who wants to come to a charter school?
Yes. So charter schools by law in Mississippi cannot impose any admissions requirements, except you have to be in the grade where the school has a grade. So if a school is 5 through 8 and you're a kindergarten child, obviously you can't go because you're not going to be served in 5 through 8. But in 2013 when the law was passed, it was basically, do you live in the district in which the charter school resides, or are you in the grade? Now the legislature has changed it to say you either have to live in the district where the charter school is located, or you have to be able to come from a district that's D or F, C, D, or F, where you can cross into the district. But those are truly the only admissions requirements. All other things are exactly the same, and that's not very different from the traditional public schools. Now, traditional public schools have ways in which they do have selective enrollment schools. Jackson, for example, has several schools that you have to score certain test scores in order to get into, or compete in certain ways, either artistically to get in the arts program, etc. None of those admissions requirements are even legal for charter schools. So charter schools actually are truly open to all comers.
Mike, you're an attorney, and you were aware of a lawsuit that's out there, quite aware of this lawsuit that would threaten the existence of charter schools as we know them now in Mississippi. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's an out-of-state group called the Southern Poverty Law Center. They have a chapter here in Mississippi. They filed a lawsuit back in July suing the governor, the Department of Education, and Jackson Public Schools, arguing that the Charter School Act is unconstitutional, saying that the funding mechanism for the Charter School Act violates 2 different sections of the Constitution. And it basically comes down to the problem they have with it is it's not under local superintendent control and not under the state superintendent control. But the unintended consequences here are, if the Southern Poverty Law Center is successful in this lawsuit, there are a lot of things that are going to happen. The Mississippi School for Math and Science up in Columbus area, they could close. The Mississippi School for the Arts in Brookhaven, they could close. All these schools around the state, agriculture schools, Mississippi School for the Deaf and Blind, all these schools around the state that are not under the control of the local superintendent, if this lawsuit is successful, could lose their funding.
What about the argument that charter schools siphon funding away from standard public schools? That funding that could go to these schools that are having a hard time is being sent to charter schools instead, along with the students.
Well, I think it's a red herring. Yes, funding does move with the child, but here's the thing. If, say, the Jackson Public School, whatever it is, has 100 kids, if 5 of those kids go to the charter school, the money that was associated with those 5 children go with the children. So now the Jackson Public Schools are only educating 95 children. So yeah, money did leave, but they still have the same proportional amount of money to educate those 95 children, and the charter school has the money to educate those 5 children. So money does leave the traditional public school, but they receive the same money that they would have had charter schools not been there, based upon per pupil amounts.
Rachel, what do you make of that criticism?
Well, I would say that money belongs to children. Money belongs to children. It's for the purpose of the education of children. And where the children are being educated is where the money should go. Certainly, no one wants traditional public schools to have so little money that they can't function. Most of our children, the vast majority of our children in the state of Mississippi, over 400,000 of them are in traditional public schools. Charter schools are public schools too, though, and they serve 600 kids in the state of Mississippi. Those children deserve public dollars for their public schools, just like the other 400,000 children. And I agree with Mike, it is a red herring, because what we're talking about here is we're talking about schools educating children. We're not talking about schools educating, whatever they deem to be. We want to educate 500 children, so we're going to maintain a building and a facility and a system for 500 children, even though we only have 300 children, right? So everybody has to figure out what is the best way to educate the children we have with the dollars we have, as opposed to, this mythical world of children that maybe we want to have, but we don't have anymore.
And here's the irony, Wilson. The parents that I represent, they're taxpayers in Jackson. And the irony is, not only do these parents that I represent in this lawsuit have kids who are attending the charter schools, they also still have kids who are attending the Jackson public schools. They're taxpayers. Like Rachel said, the money that they pay in taxes should be going to educate their children, no matter what school they go to. In this instance, these are both public schools that public money is going to educate these children.
What kind of outcome are you hoping from this lawsuit?
Well, I'm hoping that I think it'll probably end up at the Mississippi Supreme Court, and my hope is that the Mississippi Supreme Court will find that the Charter School Act is constitutional.
All right, let's talk about what the Republican leadership in the legislature brought up just this week about the funding formula, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program. And they brought in an outside outfit to examine the funding formula and perhaps reformulate it. Rachel, do you think that poses any threat to charter schools? Is it potentially a good thing for future charter schools? What's your take?
Well, I don't think that examination will have a differential effect on charter schools than it will have on traditional public schools, and here's why. Charter schools currently get MAP funds. They currently get every dollar that traditional public schools get. So they have parity, basically, in the dollars that they get on a per pupil basis from the state. So examining the funding formula and changing it, it's not really about charter schools versus traditional public schools. It's about every public school child and every public school dollar. The way that the funding formula works is completely separate from the way that charter schools are authorized. So when you're looking at the funding formula, you're truly just looking at the dollars and how they flow, as opposed to the authorization process, which is who opens charter schools, how many charter schools they get, how many children they serve, et cetera. So I'm not expecting the formula change to have a differential effect, as I said, on charter schools in terms of are they going to get less money, et cetera. Right now they have parity, and I would expect the legislature to keep it at parity for both traditional public schools and charter schools.
Rachel Canter, Executive Director of Mississippi First and Board Chair of the Mississippi Charter Schools Association, and Mike Hurst, Director of the Mississippi Justice Institute. Thank you both for joining us on At Issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.